Your source for everything paranormal. Parax.
Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Channeling History. If you don't know it by now, we are the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen, and we're brought to you every week on the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling tonight.
And I'm your co-host, Connie Strohm, and we would like to thank you for tuning in to our show this evening. Tonight we will be channeling with the spirit of Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister of Great Britain who led that country through World War II as Hitler tried to destroy their country. He was present at the meetings that initiated the planning to rebuild Europe after the war. I think you will find this a most interesting and educational interview.
Now, when we begin channeling tonight, you will hear Connie ask the questions, and when I answer the questions, it will be in the words of our spirit guest, Winston Churchill.
We always welcome questions from our chat room, and each week we give our listeners the opportunity to participate in our show by going to the Parax chat room and giving us questions. We think we have one of the more unique shows since, as Barry said, all of our guests have passed and are on the other side of the life veil. Please tell your friends about us so we can grow our audience and get that education out there. All of our shows are available on our YouTube channel. It's in Barry's name, and our last name is spelled S like in Sam, T-R-O-H-M like in Mary.
You can also hear us on many of the other internet platforms such as Spotify, Audible, iTunes, Pandora, and many more. Now, before we begin each week, two things happen. I always give a disclaimer concerning our channel, and Connie always gives a prayer of protection. So I know that Winston is going to be speaking of some topics that many of you out there may not agree with, so I'm going to start with the disclaimer. The opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits, do not necessarily reflect our opinions or those of the Parax Network or our sponsors. Now, one other thing that we always do, before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection, because there is evil out there, and we want to be protected when we open the channel to the other side. So Connie's going to say the prayer, and then we will get started.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. So, Winston, welcome to our radio show. It'd be nice to talk to you again. Would you like to begin with a message for our listeners?
Absolutely. I never pass up a chance to speak to the people. And I find it very interesting just how easy it is to speak to large crowds now. In my day, it was a little more difficult. Radio was just beginning, and it would be very hard to reach large groups of people. Today, you're blessed with mass communication, and as I watch from over here, I see that it can be both a blessing or a curse. Sadly, there are many people that no longer tell the truth. They no longer tell history as it actually happened. And I would like to point out that learning history is one of the most important things you can do. I would hope that individuals would learn from the mistakes of the ancients and of the people that came before them. But today, your schools are distorting history. I would like to congratulate Barry and Connie for doing this show because they are trying to bring you history as it actually happened. If you can't listen to the spirits that lived the events, then there's really very little else you can do to learn the truth. So anyway, I'm here. I'm happy to be back, and I am awaiting your questions.
Okay, I think you're off to a great start. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your family life as a child.
I had a very happy family life. My father was a fairly important person in Great Britain. We were not overly wealthy, but we were very comfortable. And I grew up meeting many of the political figures of our times. My dad was a very good person. He really didn't spend too much time with us because he was so busy. But I did love him. My mother was a wonderful person. She tried to teach me. She tried to keep me straight because in those days, I must admit, there were a few wild oats that I was sowing. But Mother was a wonderful person. She was religious. She believed in God. And she passed those beliefs on to me. So all in all, I had a very, very good childhood. I was well educated, and I would say that my parents did as much for me as they could.
That's great. I wish all kids could say that. What was your record at Sandhurst Military Academy?
Once I got to Sandhurst, I decided I better take things more seriously. There were times in my earlier schooling that I must admit I just kind of ignored the professors because I thought them quite boring. But I'd always wanted a military career, and I realized that if I screwed up with my military training, that it would have a bad impact upon what I really wanted to do in life.
Okay. Would you describe your military history in India?
As a young officer, I was assigned service in India. I got to know many of the Indian people. Now remember in those days that the British Empire were basically in control of everything that happened in the state of India. They were considered part of our vast holdings of land. Remember, in those days there was a saying that the sun never failed to set on a country that was controlled by Great Britain, and that was quite true. We controlled India, and as I look back, I can see that there were ways that we should have been more lenient with them, and there were ways that we should have given them much more freedom to follow their own destiny. But my military history in India actually gave me some very poor opinions of the Indian people. I felt that they needed British control. So I was always in favor of British colonialism, and I felt that that would be the only way that the people could really do well. As time went on and wars began, wars came and went, I did finally realize that maybe it would be best if they had their own freedom. But my true realizations really came when I crossed over and could have a much different look from this side of the veil.
So at the time that you were there, you had doubts at times that England had a right to be in India?
No, I never doubted that they had the right to be in India. Throughout my time, I always felt that Great Britain would be like a father to the Indian people, and that their best destiny would be if they were controlled by Great Britain.
Okay. Tell us about your participation in the Boer War.
The Boer War in South Africa was very interesting. I actually was sent there as a war correspondent at that time, and when I first arrived, I was captured by the Boers. Now, most people have never even heard of the name Boer War, but it was a group of white individuals from Great Britain, or that were living under British rule, that felt that they should be free, and actually went to war and were fighting with with the British for their freedom. In the beginning, the Boers were very good fighters, could control the lands that they had, but the sheer numbers and power of the British military eventually wore them down, and they were defeated. I got to know many of the individuals, and it helped me understand the thinking of the people that lived there into how they would much rather govern themselves. I escaped from the Boers and got a lot of publicity out of it. I probably didn't deserve it, but the publicity that I gained by escaping down there helped a lot in my early political career, and even helped that I would gain positions in the government where I would be able to influence the British military.
Okay, in the beginning of your political career, you were a member of the Conservative Party. Then you switched to the Liberals in 1904, but changed the Conservative Party back in 1924. Why did you change parties?
In those days, a lot of the politics was very different to what you see today. The Conservatives and the Liberals were not as radical as they are today. If you look at party memberships that are currently in existence, you will find that there are people on both sides that are very extreme in their opinions. I started out being conservative. I felt that different types of public policies were required, and at those days the Liberals were speaking of such policies, so I changed. Then I realized that after World War I, the Liberals no longer portrayed what I felt would be best for the country, so I switched back to the Conservative Party in 1924. I guess today, switching parties like that would be political suicide, but in those days, people came with ideas and they left with ideas. And there were many things that were happening. Keep in mind that communism was being founded. Socialism was in its early days. And I realized that many of the liberals that I was associating with were thinking that socialism or communism might be the way of the future, and I wanted no part of that type of thinking. So I was pretty consistent in my thinking after I made my final switch.
Okay, why did you oppose women's suffrage?
In those days, women's suffrage was pretty much of an institution. Keep in mind that the women of my early days were relatively poorly educated. They in no way had the same educational opportunities that the men had. And many people felt that a woman's place was in the home to have children and to raise the family. I felt that women were not educated properly to vote and to have the ability to make educated decisions over who they voted for. I felt that since men were better educated, that was where the voting right should reside. Once the women began to have the right to vote, I realized that I was wrong in my thinking. Today you're seeing women with equal power with men, and that is absolutely the way that it should be.
Okay, Winston, if you were alive today, what party would you join in England?
I would still be a conservative. I would fight any type of movement towards either socialism or towards communism. Today, those forces are gaining strength and are creating a real danger to many of the countries. I feel that if the younger generation is not educated into the dangers of communism and socialism, that there will be some very tough times ahead.
Yeah. Why didn't you get along with Teddy Roosevelt?
I think the reason that I did not get along well with Teddy was that he and I were probably pretty similar. We both had strong egos, and we both felt that what we knew was the correct thing. Teddy was a pretty good president for your country. He did many things. Teddy is credited with much of the initial thinking that brought about your federal park system. He did a lot to preserve wilderness areas. But Teddy also wanted to do some of the more liberal things that I did not agree with at that time. But I really think that the root of our problem was that we were just so similar. And quite often, people with strong personalities don't get along real well.
Okay, what was your opinion of tariffs?
I was of the opinion that tariffs were not a good thing. In my time, international trade was much different. Governments did not put a whole lot of restrictions on trade, and at that time there were many that were just beginning to think that protective tariffs would protect the economics of a country. I know now that there are times that tariffs can be very useful. I see that they have been used to exert political pressures, and they can have a real effect on other economies. There are times that tariffs are very bad, but I do now see that there are times that they can serve a positive force for the economics of a country.
Okay, why were you a supporter of eugenics?
Keep in mind in those days that Great Britain had much different opinions about people in many of the countries over which they had control. In many ways, the British hierarchy were, I guess you could consider them snobs or elitists, and they felt that their opinions would be the best to control many of the other countries. I was raised in an environment where eugenics seemed to be a normal way to control growth in certain countries. I was very sorry that I was a supporter of it. I did realize that it was wrong, and once I became a member of the people on the other side of the veil, I realized that truly I was very wrong in that. When I arrived here, one of the things my guides pointed out immediately was that I was wrong in the support of eugenics.
Okay, our chat room's starting to light up. We have a few questions there. One, what are your thoughts on Brexit?
In the beginning, I felt that the European Union might be a good thing. But as time progressed, I realized that it was simply another way of enforcing worldwide elitism, or what many people would describe as a one world order. I felt that the British were being taken advantage of as time progressed with the European Union. I am glad to see that they are exerting the independence that have made the people of Great Britain so successful through the years. I know it is going to be a bit of a difficult time, but if the United States continues a strong economic relationship with Great Britain, I believe that Brexit will be a very good thing.
Okay, and we have another question. FDR had a difficult time getting America out of their isolationism. Was there more of a warning about Pearl Harbor and more foot-dragging to react than we were led to believe so that the shock would get the United States into the war?
FDR was a good friend of mine, and I considered him a very strong ally. He did as much as he could do with all of the political opposition that he had in front of him to help us. He got equipment to us early in the war, and he even allowed American volunteers to come over and especially help us with our Air Corps to defend the country. We had heard rumors that Japan was going to do something in the future. We could not determine exactly what it was, and we did not know for sure that they were going to attack Pearl Harbor. We had told Roosevelt that we felt that Japan was going to do something aggressively against the United States. We also told them we did not know what it would be exactly, but we had heard that it would be a very strong action. Roosevelt told me that he also had heard that in the future that Japan was planning something. He told me that he did not know what it was. He said that he wished that he could take stronger action, but there were so many people in Congress that wanted us to remain isolated that in many ways his hands were tied. I truly believe that he did not know exactly what was coming, and I believe that he was taken surprise by the amount of damage that the Japanese incurred upon the United States at Pearl Harbor.
Okay, let's get back to the First World War. At that time, you were the First Lord of the Admiralty and oversaw the Gallipoli campaign. You can laugh at me, Winston. This campaign was in Turkey. Could you tell us your plan for the attack of Gallipoli?
Connie?
Yes.
You're not doing real well with this.
Sorry.
It's Gallipoli.
Gallipoli. Okay.
Well, during the First World War, I felt that the best way to defeat the Axis was to attack Turkey and take them out of the war with one very strong action. I laid out a plan of action in Turkey. Our generals failed to provide the proper equipment or supplies, and in many ways made it almost impossible for our boys to succeed. The Turkish army was much better supplied with military equipment than we had been told. Sadly, many of our boys died in the attempt to attack Turkey, and I took much of the blame for what happened.
How did that end up affecting your military career?
Well, I was removed from the Admiralty and placed in other supply positions in the government. It was definitely a blow to my military career, but I still to this day feel that if they had followed my instructions and the military had carried out the actions as I had laid out for them, that it would have been successful.
Okay. How did this experience affect your preparation for World War II?
I learned many things. I had been sent to the front for several months in World War I, and I saw how trench warfare could be overcome with a mobile force using tanks and other armored equipment. I felt that our future was going to include another war. At Versailles, the leaders decided that they would saddle Germany with heavy reparations that would keep them basically in economic bondage and would make it very difficult for them to economically recover from World War I. As time went on, and I saw that the Nazi Party and Hitler were gaining political power, I realized that there would be a time where his ideology and ours would clash in the future. I tried to do my best to have our government prepare for a different type of warfare. I knew that that would include air power, and I knew that it would include advanced types of tanks and mobile equipment. Where World War I was bogged down in fighting for years during trench lines, I felt that the next war would be very fluid and that it would be controlled by mobile forces that could bring great power and have a great effect through rapid movement. I tried to lead our government towards that. I met with much resistance because there were those that felt they would never want to fight another war, that Great Britain should be isolated, and that many of the new concepts of military preparation were not acceptable and would not be successful in the future.
What was your opinion of Lenin?
When Lenin started to take control of Russia, I knew that there would be problems in the future. His concept of government was very, very difficult from what those of us in Great Britain or the United States would conceive of. I also knew that Lenin could not be trusted. I felt that what he was after was personal power, and that he would do anything to bring the Russian people in line with his teachings. I know now just how correct I was.
Sadly. Did you feel that Germany should be rebuilt after World War I?
Absolutely. I felt that Germany would have to rebuild their economy after World War I. Keep in mind that they did not suffer a lot of internal damage in World War I, and that they had a lot of industrial capabilities. I felt that they needed to be able to sustain themselves at a high economic level. Versailles, as I said earlier, laid a lot of reparations upon Germany, and those reparations led to them not being able to rebuild and gain economic stability, and the product was that when the Nazis came forward, they were very successful because the people of Germany were looking for a leader that would take them towards prosperity and world power. If the leaders at Versailles had been more understanding, I don't think that there would have been a Second World War. Okay, let's take a little bit of a break here. We will return in about 3 minutes, and we will continue talking with Winston Churchill.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
From Haunted Road Media comes an exciting new novel by author Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Two lost souls, ripped apart by murder in another century, find each other again in the present, only to discover that the murderer has followed them through time. Can their love save them, or will history repeat itself? Find out in this captivating new novel by Marla Brooks, Soul Connection, A Deadly Obsession. Available now on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com.
You've no doubt heard of Tango and Cash, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. Perhaps it takes two to tango. Well, now, on the first and third Thursdays of each month, there's a show called Tango and Friends at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Para-X Radio Network with your host, Bruce Tango. And yes, there will be at least two to tango on each episode, sometimes even more. There's going to be lots of topics and lots of guests you'll all know and lots of surprises. Tango and Friends every first and third Thursday of the month at 8 p.m. right here on the Para-X Radio Network. Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, everyone, welcome back. We have a lot more questions and 30 minutes to go. So, Connie, let's do it.
All right, let's go back to the chat room. Is it true that you were too drunk for some of your famous radio speeches that an impersonator had to step in?
I am willing to admit that I did enjoy my whiskey, but I was never too drunk to fulfill my obligations. I knew when I could drink to excess, and I must admit I did once in a while, but I also realized when it was important that I would at least show some form of sobriety.
Okay. And another question from our chat room. What did you think of the accuracy of the movie Darkest Hour? And specifically, what did you think of Gary Oldman's performance?
I thought that quite a bit of Darkest Hour was pretty good. Of course, a lot of it was more emotionalized or made to appeal to the movie audience. Overall, I would put the actors and the accuracy, I would give them a grade of a C.
Okay. What was your opinion of Gandhi?
I thought Gandhi was a damn troublemaker. He was a thorn in our side, and I always felt that the Indian people would be much better off under British rule. Gandhi was very successful, and he did bring independence to the Indian people. There were parts of that independence that I don't think were good, but I think that in the long run, he probably did the best thing.
Do you see him now that you're on the other side?
We try to avoid each other. There's no hatred over here, but you are allowed to avoid those that you would rather not be with.
Okay. Edward VIII was named King of England in January of 1936, and he abdicated the throne in December of the same year when he wanted to marry Wallis Simpson, a two-time divorcee. Why did you support the abdication of Edward VIII?
Me and Connie, I don't know what you were drinking before the show.
Just a little wine.
Okay. I supported Neville because I felt that everyone should be able to pursue personal happiness. He was truly in love, and the British people and the press were giving him a lot of problems because of the woman he fell in love with. I always loved my wife, and I felt that Edward should be able to follow his own heart.
Okay. Neville Chamberlain was the British Prime Minister from 1937 to May of 1940. His policy was one of appeasement to Hitler in order to avoid war. What was your opinion of Chamberlain?
Pardon my language, but I thought he had his head up his butt. I knew that Hitler would never tell the truth, and I realized that he would never live up to any of his promises. I totally understood that Hitler felt in his heart that he had to destroy Great Britain in order for him to gain the domination of the world that he chose. Chamberlain felt that we could avoid going to war. He appeased Hitler and was foolish enough to believe the things that Hitler told him. So let's just say I did not think much of Chamberlain.
When did you realize that there definitely would be a war with Nazi Germany?
When I saw the beginning of the Nazi Party, I listened to Hitler, and I knew that the German people were being held back economically from the terms at Versailles. And I realized that Hitler was probably going to be the savior for their country. As soon as Hitler started to gain political power, I realized that there would be a time that we'd be again at war with Germany.
Why did you oppose any attempts to negotiate with peace with Hitler?
I knew Hitler couldn't be trusted. Very simple. He would say what the world wanted him to say, and then he would do exactly what he wanted to do. I knew that any attempt with peace with Hitler would not be successful. Hitler had his mind made up that he was going to control the world and nothing was going to stop him.
Yeah, you've definitely been proven correct on that one. Did you suffer from clinical depression?
I had depression through much of my life, yes. There were times that I made many mistakes. When I was blamed for the Gallipoli fiasco, I was very depressed because I knew that they did not follow my directions. When I suggested that we needed to fully prepare for war and was ignored, I became depressed. And when Germany indiscriminately bombed our cities and no other countries of the world were coming to our support, I was very depressed as well. So there were many, many times that I felt true depression. I tried to fight it off as best I could, but yes, I was human, and I became very depressed at much of the things that happened during my times.
Okay, especially during the beginning of the war when Hitler bombed England, how did you not let the depression affect your actions?
It was extremely difficult. And returning to one of your questions, I will admit that a little whiskey did help at times. I just tried to isolate my mind. I tried not to focus on the bad things, and I tried to focus on the fact that the British people were wonderfully strong individuals, that they were not going to bend and they were not going to be defeated, and that I would be the leader that would lead them through this terrible time.
Okay. I'm getting the impression that our listeners have been really anxious to hear from you, Winston, and we have a few more questions here. It is painfully clear that evil energies have corrupted many of our politicians. We are well advised by all those on your side of the evil to become active in creating change. But what advice can you give us since the election process has been hijacked, giving us little hope?
Do not believe that the entire election process has been hijacked. If the people decide that they truly want honest elections and elections that cannot be influenced by money or foreign countries, then there will be leaders come forward that will try to lead them in that, to take them in that direction. Keep in mind that people get the government that they deserve. When they elect people, they have to be shown how they made either good choices or, in some instances, terrible choices. I know that you're going through a very difficult time. I'm watching over here as people are leaning towards socialism and even communism. Your younger generations have not had to live through the things that we did. We saw how millions of people were killed through socialism and communism. It was very, very easy for us to take strong actions. It has been generations since your country has seen true sacrifice, large-scale wars, and people violently trying to overthrow your way of life. The younger generations have got to study history and understand what has gone before them, and let that history be the foundation for the future. Today you have access to communications that we never had access to. Use them to point out what is happening in your world. The more people that help show others what is taking place, the better chances you will have for a successful future.
Okay, we have another question from one of our listeners. Did you know that diverting food from India for the war effort would cause the mass starvation in India?
We did not realize the extent to what was taking place. We also realized that the war effort was incredibly important. In wartime, you have to make decisions, and you have to do what you feel is best for the country.
Okay, in February 1942, in the Battle of Singapore, nearly 85,000 British soldiers surrendered to about 30,000 Japanese soldiers under General Yamashita. What was your opinion of the capitulations in Singapore?
I couldn't believe it. When we found out that our forces had given up, I was depressed for quite a while. They did not have the wherewithal or the desire to fight. I had given the order to General Percival that he was to fight to the end. He ignored those orders, and in the end, all of our boys were sent to prison camps, and over half of them died. If he had fought effectively, the Japanese army did not have supply lines to continue the battle. It would have been extremely easy for them to defeat them. Why they gave up, I don't know. But it was a terrible, terrible decision.
Okay, what was your opinion of Franklin Roosevelt?
Franklin and I were good friends. He was very frustrated that he could not give me more support because he understood what was coming with the Nazis, and he also understood that Japan was trying to take over the Pacific. But he was limited by what would be allowed to happen by his Congress and actually by the majority of the people of the country. It was not until Japan attacked Pearl Harbor that he could really become involved.
Okay, what did you personally know about Japan invading Pearl Harbor?
As I said earlier, we heard that something was going to take place, but we did not have the specifics.
Okay, what was your opinion of Stalin?
Oh, Stalin. Yes. I knew that we had to rely on the Russians to create another front. Otherwise, Hitler would be able to send all of his forces against us. We had to be good to Stalin. We had to get him heavily involved in the war, which he was. In order to keep his involvement, we had to make concessions to him. And I knew that Stalin also had great ambitions and could not be trusted. We were between a rock and a hard place. We needed him, but we knew we couldn't trust him.
Okay, in February of 1945, British and American heavy bombers dropped high explosive and incendiary bombs on the city of Dresden, Germany, resulting in the deaths of around 25,000 civilians. What was your opinion of the bombing of Dresden?
I knew that it was going to create great havoc. We knew that the German civilians had bought into the Nazi Party. While we knew that it was going to create a large number of civilian deaths, we also knew that we had to bring the war to an end one way or another. I felt that since they had bombed our cities with no discretion, that it was fair for us to do the same to them.
Okay. As World War II ended, what action did you believe should have been taken against the Soviet Union?
At the end of the war, the Soviet Union became very aggressive in what they wanted. I felt that we should have resisted them more. Roosevelt felt that we still strongly needed their help. There were times that I was advised that we should go to war against the Soviet Union while they were still weakened by the Nazi resistance. In retrospect, perhaps that is what we should have done.
Okay. What was your opinion of Charles de Gaulle?
Charles de Gaulle was an arrogant a-hole. That's about as definitive as I can be in what I thought of Charles.
Okay, back to the chat room. What were the primary differences between your life plan and your actual life's events? And how have you resolved those differences from where you are now on the other side?
When I arrived on the other side, I realized that that was my general life plan, that I had been sent back to provide leadership to Great Britain, just the same as other leaders had been sent back to provide leadership to America, Australia, and many other of the Allied countries. I found out that even though there had been times that I did not totally succeed in following my life plan, that I pretty much accomplished what I was meant to accomplish. The judgment that I had when we returned was very good, and I was told that I had performed pretty much as they had hoped.
Okay. Did you ever want to accept a position that would make you part of the royal hierarchy?
No, I was always very popular with the people. That was the main part of my strength, and that was why I could accomplish much. I felt that if I accepted positions in the royal hierarchy, that it would affect my popularity with the people. So it was not until the end of my life that I started to accept any type of position.
Okay, what was your opinion of the founding of the European Union?
In the beginning, I thought it was a good idea. I thought that it would be successful in opposing the economic battle that was taking place with the Soviet Union. But as time went on, the leaders of the European Union became more and more dictatorial, and they became more and more, I think, opposed to what was best for Great Britain.
Okay, in 1947, the Indian Independence Act was passed. What was your opinion of the Indian independence?
I was not totally in favor of it. I still felt that the best path for India would be with close ties to Great Britain.
Did you believe the Muslims and Hindus should be separated?
I always knew that the Muslims and Hindus were going to create a problem if India gained their independence. We kept them separated as best we could because we knew they had strong dislikes. When independence was achieved and Muslims and Hindus were given their own individual areas, it created great upheaval in the government.
Okay. What did you think of Dwight Eisenhower being named Supreme Commander of the Allied forces in Europe?
I thought that a British commander should have been put in charge, but I also realized that it's going to be the Americans with their great resources that were going to be able to truly defeat Nazi Germany. So Eisenhower was a good man. We had a good relationship. He was very intelligent and a great planner. So I did agree to allow him to become Supreme Commander.
Okay, we have another question from the chat. What do you think of the performance of the United Nations since its founding?
I thought that in the beginning, veto powers for the main countries was a good thing. As it progressed, I realized that the veto power of the Soviet Union would avoid a lot of the measures that should be taking place. As time went on, I saw that some of the secondary countries, some of the countries like Iran, many of the countries with communist ties were gaining power and were being put into positions, especially on committees, that would have an effect on what would be presented to the council. Today, I think there are still good things that are done. There are humanitarian things that they carry out, but in general, I feel that they have become very ineffective.
Okay, getting back to after World War II, were you aware of what happened to George Patton?
I thought that George was killed in Germany. It was not until I arrived over here that I realized what had truly happened to him. I am extremely sorry. He was a wonderful general. George had his problems. He was very strong-headed and believed that everyone had to think the way he did. But George was one of the most effective fighting commanders in any of the armies.
Yes, my dad served under him and is full of respect for him. Another question out of the chat. Did FDR die of natural causes, or is there some form of poisoning?
No. Franklin was always in worse health than he ever let the people know. He was degenerating very rapidly at the end of the war. All the pressures were bringing him down, and he passed of natural causes.
Okay. 1945, weeks before the defeat of Japan, your Conservative Party suffered an electoral loss to the Clement Attlee Labour Party. Why did the people of England turn against you politically?
I often ask myself that same question. I guess that they thought it was just simply time for a change. Do keep in mind that I did return at a later time as Prime Minister. But It was a very difficult time for Great Britain. We'd just come through an incredible period of destruction. Our boys had been killed overseas, and I was still pretty much of the feeling that we had to take very strong positions, and I think many of the people were just worn out.
Okay. How did your health degenerate towards the end of your life?
Towards the end of my life, I started to have small strokes. Eventually, they became larger, and my health disintegrated at a very rapid rate. I had a wonderful life, and I did many wonderful things, but as all of us will experience, your health degenerates with age.
Yeah, okay, we have more questions than... looks like we're almost out of time. I'm sorry, guys. You were given a state funeral. Were you pleased with it?
I thought it was overdone. It was a very extravagant affair. I was pleased with it, but in many ways I thought that I would be better served if I had not had such an extravagant funeral.
Okay. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes. I want to thank you for allowing me to come through once more. I hope that many of you will learn the lessons of history. I hope that you will help lead the young to understand the harm that socialism and communism has brought on countries for many, many years. Have them understand that socialism and communism have killed millions of people. They are systems that simply do not work. While there are problems with your current systems of democracy, there are problems that many are taking advantage of tax laws to gain great wealth. There are many people that are trying to gain power, and there are many people in your government that have no regard for the rights of the people and what is best for them. Make the people understand that they need to elect representatives that will further the good of the normal person. Step back and remember that people deserve the government that they elect. If you elect people that do not support you, then you will get the government that you deserve. So thank you for having me. I hope that people will still listen to me. If you want me to come back, I would be very, very happy to do it.
We may just need to do that.
Okay, thank you, Winston. Very good. Okay, next week we're going to do a very, very special channeling. We have many members of the Muslim faith that listen to our show, and they have requested that we channel the Prophet Muhammad. Out of respect to the Prophet, next week we will not be doing any commercial breaks. The show in its entirety will be dedicated to his words. This will be a very, very special show, and we hope that you tell your friends about it and join us. You can submit your own questions through our email, channelinghistory@parax@gmail.com. We invite you to join our other podcast, The Weekly Message from Jesus. We post that on Wednesdays on our YouTube channel. So thank you all for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the ParaX Radio Network.
We'd like to thank you all. I would like to thank you also for joining us. Have a wonderful week, and God bless you all.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.